Good evening, everyone. We want to welcome you to our Heartbeat seminar. It's our annual Expo. So we want to welcome each of you, especially those who are at home watching us. You're going to be really thankful for learning so much about health and what you can do on your own to make better choices for life. Tonight, we're going to have a special guest here to teach us more about what we can do to have a balanced life. And her name is Caroline Tremblay. She's one of my really good friends, and we're very happy to have you here, Carrie.
Thank you. I am grateful for the invitation. It's lovely to be here.
Okay, so Michael, can you help us with our theme song?
Give thanks. This beautiful song is sung to a well-known tune many of you may already know. Give thanks with a happy heart. Give thanks with a harmonious heart. Give thanks with a healthy heart. Give thanks. Give thanks. One more time. Give thanks with a happy heart. Give thanks with a harmonious heart. Give thanks with a healthy heart. Give
Well, thank you so much, Michael. So now we want to go straight to our main message. So, Caroline, you have a special title for us?
Good evening. Once again, it's a happy time to be here. And when I was considering what I had to say about, I was considering the health message that you're doing this weekend, and I thought, well, we're going to be talking a little bit about negative emotions. It sounds contradictory, but really, how do we clear those out of us so that we are truly healthy, that our internal mind, our thinking is healthy? So tonight we're just talking about negative emotions, and I'll begin with sort of a list. Maybe you guys can help me. If you have any ideas about what a negative emotion is, please shout it out. I have a little list here. Shame, humiliation, sadness, anger, grief, even fury. Now I want you to sort of sit back and think about what those feelings feel like inside of you when you're experiencing those. What's that like? Where do you notice that? We're really born with the spectrum of emotions. Negative emotions aren't necessarily bad. They're like warning signs telling us that something doesn't feel right or isn't sitting right with us. So we can if we pay attention to them, they can be super helpful. I'm not saying advocating for negative emotions, but we sort of experience them in our daily life. If we get slighted somewhere, we feel that, right? You know, there's that saying, oh, this thing happened and it ruined my day. Well, I'd like to see that reduced to, it upset me for a few minutes, and I had to get through it. So the thing with the spectrum of emotions, I think I'm getting some feedback here, is that when we're experiencing these heavier emotions, they can tend to block out the more positive ones that we're after, that we want to feel, that we want to live with. So they become a barrier to us in many ways. They harm our relationships. They can interfere with our hopes and the things we might do better. that we would want to do, that we would want to give people around us if we had that capacity. So negative feelings and things like resentment have been likened to a little stone in our heart. We get insulted or hurt by something someone said, and it's a little stone in our heart. It injures us in a way. It's a little injury, or a big injury sometimes, but it affects our behavior. It affects how we think, and it affects how we see that person, or how we see those situations the next time. We're very absorbent to negative feelings. This isn't New Age thinking. It's just that we are naturally picking up the biggest emotions in the room. So if you've ever been in a Starbucks and witnessed someone shouting at the person behind the counter or really misbehaving, there's no possibility that you can ignore that. You're affected by it. We want it to stop. We don't like it. All right? We don't, but it also affects our own mood. It affects our own sense of our well-being. So, while working on our physical health, why don't we just work on getting some of those harder emotions to deal with worked out, and being able to truly be free of them, to let go some, to work through others, to come to conclusions. So I'd like you just again to return to this. Imagine what grief feels like. Where do you feel that? Is it a good emotion? It's not an easy emotion, but it has a physical effect on us. We feel these heavy emotions right in our body, the same way we do joy. You can ask a child, when they're happy, what they're feeling, or they're nervous and there might be butterflies. So there is a physical component to our emotions. What does anger feel like? It's terrible, right? It's a terrible thing, and the problem with these emotions also, as I said, it prevents the good ones, but it also can block out your reasoning. It can block out your reasoning thinking. And we really want to be able to think about what's going on around us. Even if it's hard, we want to hold on to our mind. Have you ever sort of been angry and lashed out, or someone said something that offended you, and you're either offended and walk away, or you're offended and, even worse, you engage? So neither of these are the responses we would want if we had our thinking mind. So we have the symbolism of the stone in our heart, and I think the reason we have that is because that's what it feels like. If we're angry at someone, there's a little stone in there. Maybe it's time to push some of those stones out. This begins in our mind. So I have a little video I'd like you to see before we go further.
Not so long ago, many scientists believed that the brain did not change after childhood, that it was hardwired and fixed by the time we became adults. But recent advances in only the last decade now tell us that this is simply not true. The brain can and does change throughout our lives. It is adaptable, like plastic. Hence, neuroscientists call this neuroplasticity. How does neuroplasticity work? If you think of your brain as a dynamic, connected power grid, there are billions of pathways or roads lighting up every time you think, feel, or do something. Some of these roads are well-travelled. These are our habits, our established ways of thinking, feeling, and doing. Every time we think in a certain way, practice a particular task, or feel a specific emotion, we strengthen this road. It becomes easier for our brains to travel this pathway. Say we think about something differently, learn a new task, or choose a different emotion. We start carving out a new road. If we keep travelling that road, our brains begin to use this pathway more, and this new way of thinking, feeling, or doing becomes second nature. The old pathway gets used less and weakens. This process of rewiring your brain by forming new connections and weakening old ones is neuroplasticity in action. The good news is that we all have the ability to learn and change by rewiring our brains. If you have ever changed a bad habit or thought about something differently, you have carved a new pathway in your brain and experienced neuroplasticity firsthand. With repeated and directed attention towards your desired change, you can rewire your brain.
And that is very much a theme of what we're doing. I have seen people that, I've talked with people that are very advanced in life, you know, maybe from my perspective, they might not appreciate that, but truly, there is always hope for change as long as we're here and we're thinking. And some people will come to me at this very advanced age and say, I don't want to live like this anymore, or I need to resolve this area of my life that is unfinished. So as long as they're there and there's a will, there's an ability to change. And the people around us can perceive it, and we'll revisit that thought later in the program. But when we change, we're really, there's this silly saying that always drove me crazy, and it's called, you know, be the change you want to see. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's so kitsch. But the truth is the change begins in us. We may have relationships that are troubling to us, but we can't go and try and fix the other person. We have to fix ourselves. It starts with us. So when I was in university and learning about this, I had a brilliant professor who knew that we needed to experience this, to feel it, rather than just to read it from a book or discuss it amongst ourselves, you know, in this little privileged circle of learning. And so she worked at the Men's Trauma Center in one of the cities. And these men had a real past. Some of them were mandated to be there. So you can imagine if the law is telling you you have to go get counseling, you know, maybe you need counseling. Maybe you need a change. But what you know, this is just a cross-section, it's not an individual. What you typically seen there is people who had been born into a family where there was a lot of difficulties, a lot of abuse, and a lack of, you know, sometimes a lack of parenting skills, sometimes, you know, just hardship, no mother or father, poverty. And I'm not saying that this is based on poverty, but what I'm saying is hard times mean less support around you. And often there could be quite horrendous abuse that you saw, that they had experienced. And some of their stories were just terrible. But so they go through an early life, early development, where all the pieces that they need are not in place. And in fact, they're learning different kinds of ways of coping and absorbing a lot of abuse. And so bad things have been done to them. I'll leave that to your imagination, but yes, check, check, check. They're all there. And they grow up, and either through circumstances of life skills or a lot of stones in their heart, they get into relationships because that's what we do. And they want that too. And often they will either not be able to cope with a family, or they will become the abuser. They'll become the perpetrator in their own home. And so what you get is real harm done to them early, and then they begin harming. So they're harming themselves. When we are abusing someone, We're setting up our own sense of shame and guilt, and we're living out fury. So as that little video showed you, you're repeating some patterns. You're repeating a pattern of thinking all the time. But when they get mandated, they will come in and they will talk about this. And they will begin to understand how they became the people that they were, going right back. That's why, we want to understand those root causes. Not because we have to look at everything in the past, but we have to understand how we got where we were so that we can do something different. So they'll do that work, and they'll begin to experience a hope. Because what hope have you got if society looks down on you, or if you've done many things and now you're full of shame? Shame is not something we can afford. It's a little signpost along the way to say something's wrong here, but that's all it is. We can't afford to live in shame and hate ourselves. We have to move past it. How do we do that, right? So there's a lifetime of distorted thinking, of shame, and having hurt people. And then there's even the hopelessness of, like, I have a record. How do I move on? How do I, become a new person? And what you see is that none of us can change the past. We don't have to. We have to, what we would like to see is, I went through this and it was terrible, and I'm okay. I did do those things. But I have made reparations where I could. I have been forgiven. I've had to accept the forgiveness for myself, because I think that's something that happens that we can get stuck on, is seeking forgiveness but still feeling shame, right? It's like picking up those rocks again, which again are barriers, because then we become unknowable to the people in our lives. We're hiding. These are all things that we just can't afford to do. Shame, regret. Regret is like a knife in the heart. It'll kill you. There's just no positive there, right? Except to say, I regret it, and now I would do it differently. So it's really, we just want to be able to manage those emotions. Now, we're going to touch on this later, but really, our prefrontal cortex, the front lobes in our brain, are the area of reasoning. So, actually, I'm going to go back to my story, because what you see when these men, the ones I heard from, were speaking, was they wanted to pass on that good knowledge. They wanted to pass on the hope. And they were clear. They could say what they did. They could say what was done to them. And because they had done all of that work and pushed some of those stones out. We can still be sad about the things that we've done wrong. We can still, lament them in a way. But we have to also realize that we have a life. We still, as long as we're here, we have a life. We have some redemption. We have some reconciliation with the past. Now, often with these men, they're, and again, we're going to go back to that in the family section of this, but they can go back, understanding their own roots, and reconcile some of it with their own abusers. So there's no loss here. It's all gain if we choose to work with it, if we choose to understand it and understand how we became the people that we are and how to do things differently. There's no way these people were going back into their family life and going the same way they had always been. They were going forward differently. And I've seen this in my own practice. I've seen, as I said, people in their 90s who are like, man, I do not want to go, I don't want to stay the way I am. I'm suffering even, because there is a lot of suffering with these negative feelings. And, we want to be open to feeling joy. I've heard people, who are grieving you know, that negative feeling of grief, and they'll smile accidentally and be just totally horrified that they felt joy because things were so bad or so sad. And really, we have to feel some joy. We have the extremes of the emotions. We have these high, joyous times, and they're almost as overwhelming as the worst times because we just can't live in those places. We will in another place. We'll live with joy, but right now, it's just not sustainable, you know, to win a lottery every day. Even our joy would diminish if we kept on winning it every day, you know. So we want to be able to feel joy, to manage those emotions, to use our mind. It happens there first. And we'll be talking about this again, but when these men were there, as they were uncovering this and learning about themselves, they were having new thoughts. And I'm sure the old thoughts would come along in situations and say, this is who you really are. You're really this, the bad thoughts. But they had something new to reach for. So we need a way of reaching for what gives us hope. And it has to be true. If somebody said to me, Carrie, you're the most beautiful woman in the world, and you're the smartest of anybody, I would not be able to believe in that because it's not real, right? Somebody could give me a compliment on my maybe intelligence or that I did something well, and that's based on reality. And so we have to be realistic with our thoughts. And that's why we need that prefrontal thinking, that executive thinking, to sort of work things out internally, figure it out. These men were learning to think differently, to see themselves differently, to see others and situations. And at the same time, working all of that pain out, because we know that those stones are painful. And if we don't work them out, you know, we can come out of a bad relationship or a bad situation, and if we go right into the next situation, we're just going to take all of those stones with us. And we have to learn how to take care of that, to recognize our own negative emotions or negative thoughts, and to be able to reasonably work through them. And that means questioning them, giving them some logic, if-then kind of thinking, and always land on the side of hope. Because despair is another one of those negative thoughts that absolutely shuts us down. So we just need to see hope. We need to have thoughts that can help us, that are based in reality. And we need to practice that. It's a practice. We're never one and done. These are things that we struggle with, but as we shed one, maybe something that's there will be able to come out. And when I say this, it sounds like it's a never-ending job, that it's all negative, but the truth is that they're there anyways. These sufferings are already there. We're just letting some sunlight in and allowing some hope in. And that's why though we're talking about negative emotions, we are seeing this through a lens of hope. We can cry out our grief. We'll stop crying, right? We will stop crying and smile again. We can learn how to not hurt others, how to respond quickly. Responding quickly rarely gets us good results. And walking away. Sometimes when we involve it in a strategy. So if someone is engaged in conflict with me, I might be able to say, you know what? I can't think. I need a break. There's nothing wrong with that, and step away. But what you need to say before you go is, we will pick this up when I get back. Or, you talk to the person in conflict and say, we haven't figured this out. Maybe tomorrow after work? Or, arrange a time so that you're making something concrete. You're honoring them, and you're honoring the relationship. Because you're not cutting them off. There's nothing worse, and you hear this all the time of like, oh, if I say this, she'll just walk away, or he'll just walk away, and I'm stuck with all of this terrible feeling. But if there's a little piece at the end that says, you know what, we'll revisit this, I realize that it's not resolved, we'll revisit this, I'm not stuck with anything. I can go to sleep. So there's this concept of don't let the sun go down on your anger. And, ideally, but maybe things are too big to solve in 1 hour, But if we're committed to working through things, to talking through things, and to, we're not going to be as defensive if we hold on to our executive functions. The minute we get defensive, we've slipped back into the emotions, right? Now, I'm not saying that there's no place for emotions. We're going to give language to those. They're very important, and to our thoughts. But we don't want to respond when we don't want to respond. So, we have to figure out how to negotiate tricky relationships. And I'll just end with that. I'm sure I would love to hear, if you've got thoughts or questions, or even examples of that. I'll give you mine. When my son moved in with me for a while, my adult son, and I was like, oh no, the dishes, right? It's always the dishes. And so I said to him, he started leaving dishes in the sink, which just made me crazy. It's not because my house is perfect, but so I was like, oh, okay, I prayed about it, and I had to deal with it, and I have to deal with it because I'll be holding on to it. And so I said to him, to my son, when you leave dishes in the sink, I don't know when you're going to pick them up. So I'm going back to when you're a teenager. Are they going to be growing things on them before you move them? Are you just waiting for mom to do it because you're my son? I don't know. And I said, and this raises my anxiety. I get actually anxious. Is this going to be a thing? Are we going to have tension over it? I certainly do not want conflict with you. And so this whole process happens in my head, and he's like, it's a dish, But he doesn't realize how that is landing on me when I'm thinking, when I see that. Is it going to be there a day, a week, ever? And so once he understood, the exchange there was, when you do this, this is how it lands on me. This is what I feel and what I think. And I couldn't have done that if I was lashing out in anger, or if I had just walked away or cleaned it myself, throwing the dishes in the dishwasher. None of those are helpful. So we want to the whole theme of this weekend in my mind is creating an open space where there's before response so that we can think. All right, well are there any questions for tonight or thoughts? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. You can sit, please. Last week, I was about to be run by a car. And it just came by, a few inches away from me. And I looked at that lady driving, and she was in shock. And I felt compassion instead of anger. And then my friends that were walking behind me, they were surprised. You didn't scream. You didn't do anything like that. And never came to my mind doing that. So then I realized that there is hope. I don't have to lash back at anything, that gives me, grief. But I feel compassion about it, about her.
That is an excellent example, Cecilia. Thank you. And if we sort of hover there for a moment, our first response can often be anger, right? Just a fear, it's just a fear response, right? Lashing out or becoming overwhelmed by that. And if we can just, it sounds to me like you've already sort of learned something there, like you've done the work there, or you wouldn't, you noticed what was going on for her rather than just for you, So that's all we want, is to just be able to block out that first response. I mean, it's not usually in our favor. It doesn't help us much.
Yes, I think that there is a process of, being able to go to bed, not having those feelings against somebody or what happened. So I think it's very important to realize that anger is not a way of living. Instead, people get sick because of that. So I hope that we can all learn from this as well. If somebody else, like myself, have learned and have understood that I was born to be happy, then I will have to keep forgiving and don't get angered moving forward. So thank you so much for teaching us that lesson. So continuing with our program, we have Michael with a special music.
This is a song that's maybe centuries old that speaks about how God provides for us in every way we can ask. And we're going to be learning a lot about that this weekend in so many ways. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all. Each little flower that opens, each little bird that sings, He made their glowing colors, He made their tiny wings. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all. The purple-headed mountains, the river running by, the sunset and the morning that brightens up the sky. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all. The cold wind in the winter, the pleasant summer sun, the ripe fruits in the garden, He made them every one. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful, the Lord God made them all. He gave us eyes to see them and lips that we might tell how great is God Almighty, who has made all things well. All things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small, all things wise and wonderful,
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for this beautiful music, and those lyrics are just wonderful to hear. We are going to continue with our program. Our first exposition is about temperance. And what is temperance? Well, we want to learn what is that word. It's a very fancy word for all the kids that are watching us. So I want you to take notes on that. It is a way of understanding what we should do and what we shouldn't do, but it's your choice. And the title is Balancing Act. So this is a great exposition to start our seminar tonight. I hope you enjoy it.
Founded back in 1776, San Francisco has grown from a small coastal settlement to one of the most prominent cultural and financial hubs in the United States. With so much to do and see and offer, it can get a little overwhelming. But as with any area of life, when things are too overwhelming, we need to find balance. In today's episode, we'll be exploring ways to find balance in all areas of our life, in order to live life to its fullest. Along the way, we'll explore some new delicious recipes from the New Start Kitchen, gain some more insightful health information, and encouragement for the journey ahead. All this and more on today's episode of New Start Now. Do you ever feel like you're stuck in a race, desperately trying to catch up to the speed of life, and there's no end in sight? The fact is, we live in a world of competition, and from the decisions of large corporations to the smaller choices that we make at home, the idea of becoming something more has consumed our culture and our lives. This is seen in our homes, jobs, relationships, and even our churches. We've somehow gotten the idea that we need to race through life, gathering as much as possible to become something more. But this overly extended life comes at a cost. We lose balance and we lose sight of what is most important to us. I'm your host, Jonathan Hunter, and on today's episode of New Start Now, we'll be exploring the importance of temperance, one of the 8 components of a New Start lifestyle. First, we'll hear from someone who discovered for themselves that by trying to have it all, they lost what was most important to them. Stick around to find out more.
I was born and raised in Mexico as a child, and I'm on the standard Mexican diet. Well, you know, in childhood, you eat all the meat and the things that your parents provide for you. And later, after we immigrated to the US and we got into the standard American diet, things high in fat and high sugar foods like that, the cakes and the ice cream and the pies and things like that, you just kind of get used to it. About 28 years ago, at lunch, I had a little packet of horseradish and I put on my sandwich. And boy, that gave me heartburn. Right away, chest pain, heartburn. I went to the hospital and they kept me there a week. They did a treadmill test with me and they checked my heart as I was doing on the treadmill, walking on the treadmill. And then finally what they said was, well, you have high blood pressure. You need to get medication for your high blood pressure. That spicy thing you ate at lunch, it created fluid to build up around your heart. And that's what's giving you that. So eventually my doctor said, yeah, you do have diabetes. You are definitely now, you got full-blown diabetes. And he started giving me pills. And then my blood pressure medication too. I was taking that every day. Eventually, it came to a time when my doctors told me, I think you need to be on insulin now. I remember that was like a shock to me, like, oh, pills aren't good enough now? Different things started happening to me, like I came down with kidney stones. They analyzed the kidney stones. Yep, it was too much red meat. That certain kind of acid. The very first stone I tried to pass, it was blocking urinary tube, and they had to go in and remove it. And then, again, another shocker. It was cancerous, so I went ahead and elected to get surgery. So they removed my prostate. Quite a few months earlier, my brother had come to Weimar, went on this program, went home, kept up with the good program, the exercise, the good food and everything. He had wonderful results, and he told me about it. And so, I was thinking maybe that's what I need to do too. And then my son found out and heard about it too, and he was constantly telling me, yeah, Dad, go do it. Go do it. He knew that I was big and fat, and I couldn't walk and hike with him up in the hills and the trails and stuff like we used to. Finally, I looked it up on the computer, found out that when the next session was going to be, and I signed up for it. I committed and signed up for it, and I came August 8th, it was. My first day when I arrived here, August 8th. And I started learning all these wonderful 8 principles that they talk about here, New Start. And it took me a few days, but finally the Lord started opening my mind and just letting me know, these are the blessings that I want to give you, I want to help you improve your health. And, I could see myself sliding to an early grave. And, but I tell you, since I've been here eating this good food, I don't feel tempted. I go by those places now, and I'm not tempted to want to buy some more of that barbecue beef or the burgers. Now, not only was I addicted to the meat, certain kinds of meat, but coffee. I was pretty much accustomed to having coffee in the morning, and then later in the afternoon, more coffee. After I went through this program, I lost 24 pounds. My first pounds that I lost, I was never, before I came here, I was never able to lose any weight. My doctors kept telling me, you need to do something to lose weight. You need to do something. Well, it's hard to give up that barbecue beef, that Kentucky Fried Chicken, it's very hard to give all that up. But anyway, after being here and eating this good food and exercising every day and being inspired and motivated, no way am I going back, to that old lifestyle that's going to take me right back to an early grave. No, not me. Yeah, my goal is just to keep going with this good New Start program for life.
What a powerful story. Isn't it amazing to see how when you take a step back or when something big happens in your life, you gain perspective and you see what truly is and is not important to have a balanced life. For me, the best place to have that balance is here in nature, secluded from the hustle and bustle of everyday life in the city. The sounds and the quietness allows me to focus on what's truly important. But how do we make this relevant to our everyday lives? Stick around to find out.
Oh, you want me to do this thing?
Yeah, go for it.
You're serious?
Yeah. Take one.
Temperance to me is completely avoiding things that are harmful
Taking care of our body, listening to our body.
and using in moderation the things that are good.
Balance is an interesting thing because probably very few of us have ideal balance. We're always struggling to have balance.
Big balance that people struggle with today, I would say above everything else, is the balance between work and the rest of their life.
One of the most common areas is too much screen time, too much media. And you know, the average person has between 4.5 and 6 hours of free time every day in this country.
People have a problem with the amount of entertainment that they're hungry for.
But the average person spends over half of their free time on screens.
As opposed to doing something that is productive and helpful, that contributes to their well-being, the well-being of their family, the well-being of society.
We also find that we lose balance in areas of sleep.
Some people sleep too much, 8, 10, 12 hours a day. That's not a good balance, but some people only get 4 or 5 hours a night.
In areas of appetite.
Many of the foods that are sold these days are designed to trigger our brain for a reward system, whether it's serotonin or dopamine or what have you. And so if people are shortchanged on their happiness in other ways, sometimes they'll turn to food or other substances to try and boost that.
Work, sleep, sugar, fat, and then alcohol, nicotine, etc.
Those are all areas where we may lose balance.
So temperance is a big topic, and if you look at every single piece of it, smoking, for example, tons of literature, drinking, tons of literature, drugs, obviously. But also in obesity, there's a lot of literature to suggest that that is a major issue.
If we get off in one area, it is more likely we're going to get off in another area, and it's like a domino effect where the whole life starts to fall apart.
The warning signs of being out of balance are
having problems with your mood, that you're having problems with your relationships.
Irritability is one of the things, lack of sleep, insomnia, anxiety, depression.
And so when you start to have aches and pains, you start to not feel good, you start to lose energy.
Well, stress, fatigue.
When you go into a stressful situation, let's just say you get depressed, you're not exercising, you're getting a lot of stress at work, your cortisol levels go up, your blood pressure may go up, your fasting heart rate goes up, you end up having physical outcomes from that.
Quite a few years ago, I saw a study of actually on mice where they put them in stressful situations. And mice that were overstressed didn't live very long. But mice that had some stress in their lives actually did quite well with that. And then an interesting thing, they took mice that had zero stress at all, and guess what? They lived the least of all of them.
There is a study that was done many years ago called the Index of Life Stresses. And they look at the things and they quantitate it. In fact, loss of a spouse was the item that gave you the most points. I think it was like 80 points. And every stressor, they would assign different points. And they said, if you achieve more than 100 or 120 points in a 12-month period of time, you had like an 80% chance of having a major disease in the next year.
We can't avoid stress, but how we manage it is very important.
I think life balance is a challenge for many, and one of the ways to really work on improving that
is making sure that we take time for adequate devotions. That will improve our frontal lobe. Even getting some nice heavenly harp music or things where we can reflect. We want to take time for reflection.
Our bodies do better when they are on a schedule, when it knows what to expect and it knows when things are coming.
If you personally struggle with intemperance and bad habits, find an accountability partner.
I think the most important thing with maintaining life balance is a strong relationship with God, because He's the one that helps us to see ourselves as we really are. I am easily self-deceived, and it's Him revealing things to me that helps me to see where I'm out of balance. Hi there, I'm Dr. Kuninobu. Temperance is an interesting word that many people can often be confused about. Temperance means using good things in moderation and completely avoiding all bad things. We know, for example, that nectarines, peaches, and plums are good for us. But we also know what would happen if I ate a whole bag of plums in the form of prunes. Yes, even moderation of good things is important too.
With such little time and so many options to choose from, it's easy to replace a healthy meal with a quick fix. But what if it was just as convenient to find something healthy and delicious? Let's head on over to the New Start Kitchen to see what our friends have prepared for us today.
Welcome to the New Start Kitchen. I'm Margaret Gallant, and today we're going to make some oat burgers. So right away I want to try to get some water boiling, so let me put some water in here. I'm putting 3 cups in, and I want to get that kind of going. All right, so as we get our water, we're going to put some other ingredients. We're going to put 1/4 cup liquid aminos. Get that in. And this is going to make a really nice seasoned water where we're going to put our oats in later. So we're going to put liquid aminos, and then we're going to put a teaspoon of liquid smoke. You don't have to put the liquid smoke in, but I kind of want to make these like a oat sausage. So I'm going to put the liquid smoke in today. I'm also going to put in a tablespoon of chicken seasoning, whatever your favorite chicken seasoning is. And I'm going to put in 3 tablespoons of yeast flakes. So what we're going to do, oh, and don't let me forget, oh, this is the best part. I chopped up diced up an onion, and we're going to put that in. If you don't have an onion, but you have onion flakes, you can use onion flakes also, but I love to have the fresh onion in there. All right, so what we're going to do is let this simmer. We're going to let it simmer for about 4 minutes. So it's going to be a wonderful broth, and then we'll add the rest of the ingredients in a few minutes. We'll be right back after 4 minutes. All right, so we've let this simmer for about 4 minutes, and it's looking really great. What I'm going to actually do is take it off the heat, and then we're going to add 3 cups of quick oats. And I like to use quick oats just because the oats won't show so much when you're making the oat patty. If you have old-fashioned oats and you want to use that, that's fine. You're just going to see them more in the oat patty. And then I'm also going to use 1/2 cup of ground nuts. And today I'm using walnuts, but you can use whatever nuts you'd like, pecans or cashews or whatever. But I like to use the walnut because it's so good for you. So I'm going to put that in here. And we're going to stir it up, and we're going to let it sit and absorb. So this might take a few minutes. So what I would do if it was me cooking, I would let this sit for a while and absorb all that into the oats, and then we'll come back when we can touch it when it's cooler, and we'll make the patties. So we'll see you in a few minutes to do that. All right, so we've let them sit, so I can now start handling them. They're not too hot, and the water is absorbed up into the oats. So now we're going to start making our patties. So my trick to make them symmetrical and all the same size so they cook evenly is to use a canning lid. So you use a canning lid with the little sealer thing, and what you do is you just put the oat burger mixture in the canning lid like this and pack it down. And then you just plop it down like that and use a little spatula and you got a nice little burger right there. So we're going to keep doing this until the pan's filled up, and then we're going to put it in the oven at 375. So I'm using these as a smaller canning lid, but you can use a larger canning lid and make them into a veggie burger type size. But like before, I said I was making them into a sausage patty. So I would serve these with scrambled tofu for a breakfast or something like that. And what we want to do is, if we make a whole big batch of these, then we can actually freeze them when we're all done. And you can have them in the freezer ready to go and just pull them out and warm them up. And it's a great way to have things in your freezer ready to eat. So you don't have to do this every single time you want a sausage patty or a burger. So these freeze really nicely. Yes, and these are, if you go to the store and start looking at veggie burgers made in the store, or actually made, they are full of preservatives and full of extra other things that you really don't want. So this way, you're making your veggie burger and you're knowing what's in it, and you know that you don't have to feel guilty eating these. And they smell really delicious, even like this. So you continue making them, and we will fill up this pan and get them in the oven. And then I'm going to show them to you all baked and ready to go. So we've brought the oat burgers out of the oven after we've turned them halfway through the cooking. And we've plated them here, and they just look lovely and yummy. I'm ready to try them out. We've also put our ketchup that we made in another video and our tofu mayonnaise. And it just is a lovely dish. We can use these as veggie burgers or breakfast sausages, and remember, you can freeze them. So make a whole bunch, put them in the freezer, and you can have these oat burgers whenever you'd like. I hope you enjoy.
When something is out of balance, it takes more time and energy to set it straight. So, oftentimes we find ways to compensate, simply get by and leave it for tomorrow. Up next, Dr. Kuninobu will share how out-of-balance lives can impact the brain and lead to addictions.
With us today, we have Dr. Andrew Kuninobu, who is one of the physicians here with us at the New Start program. And Dr. Kuninobu, something we want to talk about today is the first T in New Start. It stands for the word temperance, a word that maybe some of us are not really familiar with or haven't heard too often. I'm wondering if maybe you could define that word for us.
Sure. I mean, it's a very interesting word, and a lot of people today probably misunderstand it, because the modern usage, or the way people tend to use it today, is just moderation in all things. That's kind of the typical way that people look at it. But historically, temperance actually was tied to prohibition and the temperance movement back in the 19th century, which was all about complete abstinence from alcohol. And so the pendulum kind of swung on usage in America from that to where it is today, where it's moderation in all things. But in actuality, it has to do with complete avoidance of things that are bad, kind of harping back to the 19th century definition, but the moderation part being moderate in things that are good for us. But unfortunately, people have kind of melded it and said, well, moderation in all things, so that's okay to be moderate in, you know, alcohol, or moderate in drugs, or moderate in, and we all would recognize that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. in actuality. I mean, would I say, moderate use of arsenic is fine?
Maybe not, yeah.
Maybe not so
it
much.
certainly lead to something that is quite final.
That's right.
So that leads me to my next question. It almost seems like the opposite of temperance then would be something like perhaps addiction. And is there maybe a term that you could, or a definition you could give us for the term addiction?
Yeah, sure. Addiction there's a number of different definitions out there. Classic addiction usually involves things like compulsion, and there's a concept of tolerance buildup. For example, using drugs, for example, let's say heroin or something like that, where somebody may start off using a certain amount and then there's a tolerance buildup, and they have this compulsion or drive to continue to do so. They become dependent upon it. And they find that if they are away from it, even if they get away from it for a while, they tend to relapse easily. And they do all of this despite the harmful effects, either on themselves or on society, family members, or somebody else like that.
So it seems that addiction is more of an issue in the mind, but it has quite a significant effect on the body, which is something that we've been covering here at New Start. So what is kind of the science behind that, of addiction in the mind?
Well, I alluded to it with the tolerance part of it, and definitely has a lot to do with the mind, but it has to do with brain chemistry.
Really?
So it is actually having to do with the body, but in a different sense, in that there are actually chemical changes that take place in the brain. And they recognize now that most things that can be termed addictions, whether it be a substance or a behavior even, such as addiction to media, a common pathways ends up being right in the limbic system where dopamine is involved, and the dopamine system and the reward system. And it's very interesting that there's a lot of biochemical common pathways that are involved in that.
Wow, so it's really something that's affecting our bodies, but it's starting in our minds and has a large degree to do with the chemistry of our minds. So what can you do for maybe patients that are coming to you that have these addictive problems, that are having perhaps negative effects on their physical health, but it's really a mental problem? Is there something that can be done for their physical health to help their mental health, or vice versa?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, first of all, the number one thing is that a lot of people think, well, I know that whatever it is, fill in the blank, is bad for me, but I'm just going to kind of taper down. Again, they throw in that concept of moderation, and that just doesn't work. In actuality, based on the chemistry and everything, the best thing actually to do is complete abstinence, complete stopping. Because unless you do that, you continue to feed those same pathways, and it's very, very difficult to get the brain to heal. I didn't even mention some of the things that happen, for example, to drug addicts, that it affects not just that system, but it affects the frontal lobe, being able to make decisions, etc. And in order for that to heal, there has to be complete abstinence. And it goes for many of the different things that we get addicted to.
So you talked about drug addiction, for example, but addiction is even something perhaps that could affect us in a way that would be more subtle, that we wouldn't normally term addiction, like perchance in the foods that we eat.
Sure.
Or just other various behaviors that we might have that have a negative effect on our body. What are some things that you can tell people to maybe help them to prevent going into these addictive behaviors or forming these bad habits?
Sure. Well, one is understanding the definition. So often we fall back to the world's definitions of things like moderation and all things. So we think, oh, it'll be fine if I just, have some of this, and then we know it's not the healthiest thing, but then it leads to a little bit more and a little bit more. So understanding that concept and truly avoiding the things that are bad. But keeping the whole body and mind healthy involves actually all the different elements of New Start. Eating healthfully to begin with helps avoidance of getting into certain things, obviously, but drinking lots of water, getting our exercise, getting our rest or our sleep, this well-balanced life in all these different aspects helps us with prevention as well as treatment of addiction.
So kind of being moderate in all the different aspects of health rather than just honing in on one, but taking it all together can really help us to have that comprehensive health and the self-control maybe to turn away from things that would be negative for our bodies and cause addictions and whatnot. Well, thank you, Dr. Kuninobu. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about temperance and help us to understand more of what this term means, and I hope we can implement these principles that you've shared with us. Up next, we have Dr. Gallant, who's going to be sharing a little more on this topic of temperance.
Hi there, I'm Dr. Galland. Did you know when caffeine is combined with a dopamine-stimulating event, it can create lifelong habits? The release of dopamine is triggered by things like sugar, fat, carbonation, intense flavors and aromas, and pleasing sights and sounds. Specialty coffees often contain large amounts of sugar, fat, and appealing flavors and aromas. This can turn an occasional coffee drinker into an addicted, repeat customer. So instead of another cup of caffeine, why not grab a bottle of water? With 0 calories, natural minerals, and no side effects, it's a good habit worth repeating.
There's nothing like escaping to the peace and quiet of nature to get away from the craziness of life and to gain perspective. Many of us find ourselves in a conflict between our tendencies, desires, and what we know is best for us. Perhaps you found yourself in this conflict and would like to make better choices and live a life of temperance. Up next, Dean Collin will share how to go through life with someone that could help us find balance and peace.
From as early as the 19th century, the temperance movement has fought valiantly against the purchase, selling, and consumption of alcohol, citing its obvious destructive tendencies, leading countless individuals, their families, and even whole communities in its wake. True temperance, however, is concerned with more than just alcohol consumption. The Apostle Paul, when writing about what a life that is truly directed by the Spirit of God looks like, specifically mentioned the word temperance, except he used the Greek word enkrateia, which is far more akin to what you and I would call self-control. What I'm trying to say is, you may not be given to drunkenness, but if you find yourself frequently losing your temper, or living a lazy and slothful life, or even just consistently seeking self-pleasure, that too is intemperate. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, is the perfect example of what a truly temperate man looks like. 33.5 years, and he never once lost his self-control. At one point, he was led into the wilderness for a battle of the ages, where he would go toe-to-toe with his ancient foe, the Satan. Except this wasn't a battle of swords and shields, no. It was a test of integrity, morality, and true devotion. Jesus prepared for this, not by stocking up on protein bars and spending countless hours in the gym, but instead by departing to a place of isolation, where there he would spend an entire 40 days without food or water, because Jesus knew that true strength is born of discipline. And if self-control was the standard for Jesus, then it should be for our new start too.
We hope that you found today's program to be helpful, and perhaps you'd like something a little bit more in depth. Our New Start Online program is just for you. Our program offers 30+ health presentations, pre-recorded by our New Start medical team, delicious whole food plant-based recipes from the kitchen, more encouragement from Dean and others, and the resources necessary to make a change that will last. All this and more is at your fingertips, so visit the link below to start your New Start Online free trial today. And as you think about what you've learned in today's program, challenge yourself to identify areas in your life that are out of balance. Focus in on one of these and use some of the New Start Now tips, and I'm confident that you'll experience a change that will last. Until next time, I'm your host, Jonathan Hunter, and remember, it's never too late to make a new start now.
Wow, what a wonderful video we just have seen. I learned so much, and I'm very sure that you're going back home thinking, oh, this is an area that I need to change, because it's perhaps I'm doing it too much, or perhaps I need something to learn from this. So I hope that by listening to this, we can provide this video again so you can watch it home again, or you can just check our website. It will be there as well. So before we go, kids, do you remember what temperance is? Another word for it, another, let's say, fancy word was abstinence. So that's another word that, what is that too? But one word that I remember is self-control. When there is something that you know that you shouldn't eat, you just make a decision to say no, because it's not good for you, it's not good for your body, and it's going to make it easier every time that you make that decision. So we have some gift from our community. I went around some places, and they were very happy that we were putting this Health Expo together, and they sent some presents to you. So we're going to have a draw. And do you have a ticket with you? Okay. So let's see. I got an ending numbers in 3102. Ooh, okay, Ruby. You are getting a gift certificates from the Red Barn. I believe it's $25. So here you go. Unless somebody wants to come and help or give it to you right here. Next number is 3113. 3113. Oh, I have one that is close to your job. It's from Turmeric Indian Cuisine. $25 gift certificate for you. Okay. Next one is, oops, 3115. Anybody? 3115. Oh, good. So you are getting a $50 certificate to Lifestyle Market. Can one of you kids bring it to her? Thank you. Can you give it to that lady? Thank you. That's great. I have one more for tonight. And the number is 3102. 3102. Maybe it's gone already? Yeah, that one you've already said. Oh, okay. I put it back in. All right, 3111. Oh, Alana. You're going to go to the Salt Pierogi restaurant. Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoy those presents for you. Tomorrow we have plenty more. So I hope you stick around and come back, because the program tomorrow is going to be excellent. On top of that, we have, for those that are at home, we have 2 stations. One is for our nurses. We have registered nurses that are going to be able to, help you with the blood pressure. They can check it for you for free, and they're here willing to help you with that and talk about it. We have another station, it's called the Market, because the country grocer right here at Royal Oak sent us some produce, and we're going to draw some tickets, and they're gonna be able to go shopping on those produce, and you can pick it up and take it home with you. Okay? Tomorrow we are going to start at 9:30 with our first exposition with water, and Michael Majoka is in charge with Pathfinders to talk about water. Following is another one for sunlight and air. So I hope that you can make it and that you're here to support these young kids as well. I have to give big thanks to Mr. Frank, is in the back there, came all the way from Duncan to provide us special water. So come and enjoy the water that he has here for you. Thank you, Frank. And also, I had to give big thanks to our friend Nicole Schumer, who couldn't make it tonight. We hope you're feeling better, but she is the one that provided that wonderful video for you today. So thank you so much. And I hope that you have a wonderful night. I'll see you tomorrow morning.